And so now, first of all, before I introduce the chief, I just wanted to again welcome everyone and let everyone know. I think our last meeting a couple months ago, if you may remember that it was organized by oh my gosh, her name's going to escape me now.
Nancy Shattuck.
Nancy, thank you. Nancy with the police department. She was their police services specialist, and she has since left there. And after meeting with the chief and talking with him, we all felt like it was really important to keep the continuity going for this group, because there's so many issues that you all are having. We want to make sure that that we keep this top of mind for everyone. So Chief has very graciously allowed me to step in until they get their new police services specialist hired and on board to keep the continuity going for this. So thank you for that. And with that, I'd like to introduce Chief Fisher, who will be giving us an update on what's going on here.
Thank you, Laura. I think I'll start with a couple of thank yous. Laura said it graciously allowed her to step in and take that over, but she actually volunteered. And our Business Block Watch is a program that we started before the pandemic to really engage our businesses and leverage some of the successes with neighborhood watch programs to help reduce the crime in and around our business, and specifically the 99 corridor. And as the program took off, we got hit with the pandemic, and we all know how that turned out. And then on the heels of that, we faced some major legislative changes in police response that just, I think, exacerbated all of the complications from the pandemic, homelessness and crime issues that we're still working our way out of. And so thank you to Laura to step up in doing that, because I think it is a very important program. And I can say our last meeting we had and this one, we have a greater degree of engagement for our businesses. So thank you to Laura, and thank you for each of you for being engaged and being part of the solution as we work our way through some of the things we're seeing in and around our community, in and around our businesses, in and around our neighborhood. And so with that, I think what I do is I want to show you a presentation. We call it a crime update, but I do a monthly update to council. And we talk about the types of crimes we're responding to, some staffing issues, some current trends, and some good things that the police department is doing. And prior to the pandemic, I would do yearly a state of the PD address to the chamber. So businesses had a huge global idea of what was going on in the city. And Laura and I talked, we are bringing that back. I have continued to do that for city council, but we will push this forward in the chamber venue in the coming months. Typically it's around April to coincide with the release of crime stats, and it allows our staff to put that into some charts and some context so that we can present it in a meaningful manner. So that will be coming here in the coming months. And with that, I would ask Laura to bring up our presentation on the monthly PD update. This is the most recent presentation that we did for council. And I just really want to kind of hit this at a high level so that we can spend the majority of this meeting talking about what you're experiencing and what we can do in partnership to kind of help address the issues that you're seeing. And so with that, next slide. So in April, as you can see, we responded to almost 1,900 calls for service. And this is everything from patrol checks to 911 calls to on-view activity. But we track what we call Part 8 crimes, or the top 8. And so when you look almost across the board, we are seeing upticks in all of these areas. We did have a little bit of reduction in DV related calls, but our motor vehicle thefts continue to climb. Robberies are holding even. We did have an increase in the number of shooting victims, as well as shots fired calls. I guess the nice part is the uptick in vehicle recoveries coincides with an uptick in motor vehicle theft. So while we're getting a lot of vehicles stolen, we are recovering a larger number of vehicles. So a bad stat, but also a good stat in regards to our recovery rate. Next slide, please. In regards to those very same areas we track in event type by crime, this is the number of reports that officers are taking. And so not every call for service generates a report or a police action. And so again, this is just more illustrative of what our officers are spending time in regards to report writing. And again, you'll see the trend of an uptick in most of those areas. Next slide, please. And as most of you probably imagine, when we track those 8, we do so in a density map and a predictive policing map, so that when we do have discretionary patrol time, our resources are best deployed in a deterrent manner, hopefully to kind of suppress the criminal activity in and around those areas where you see the concentrated crimes in the heat map there. And I think what you'll find is, not surprisingly, those areas are around a couple of our hotels. And I will have some good news reporting out on that moving forward. Next slide, please. So as we look at calls for service, we talked about hotels and hotels being some of our issues and drivers for some of the criminal activity we're seeing. And so we were specifically tracking 2 hotels. One of them we successfully closed down a while ago. That was responsible for about a 3% reduction in crimes for service or calls for service at that one hotel. And so 3% at another establishment that we just successfully closed as well. And we look at our shots fired calls, a quarter of those are at that one establishment. Next slide, please. And so one of the big topics for the last several years has been police use of force. Fife Police Department has a very robust tracking and reporting system. Our stats go up on our website. We do an annual report. Out of 260 plus police agencies in the state, we're one of 60 that are actually accredited. And so we are responsible to our policies, to our community, and to our leadership team to make sure that we're doing things constitutionally and within best practices. And so I think one of the things to point out is the driver of police use of force, specifically in Fife, almost a quarter or a third of our use of force incident results from activities at our hotels. And the other thing I think to note is that almost 93% of our use of force incidents stem from an actual call from service, not officer initiated self activity. And so a lot of the times we're using force, it results from an actual calls from service, not an officer choosing to engage with somebody on the street. Next slide, please. And we did do, I'm not going to play this here because we tend to have issues with volume in this setting. But many of you may be aware that we do a video series called Chat with the Chief. We do ask for input or questions, and I try to address those in this monthly program. And so we had a lot of police reform and change in 2021. There was a lot of unintended consequences for that. In the 22 session, the legislature cleaned up a large number of those unintended consequences. And so within a very short time, we've had some major changes in regards to police response. And so ensuring that we're keeping on top of the training, that our officers have the most current, accurate training, and that we're responding as our community expects us to. And so if you're interested, this is on our website. You can go there and watch all the episodes that we've done. And I would urge her, if you have a topic or a question, feel free to send it to us, because we are always looking for ideas to do for Chat with the Chief. And this one was specifically done by our city prosecutor on legislative changes. Next slide, please. And one of the things we report out, and unlike any police department really in the state, is we have had some unique issues with staffing. And so we were always authorized 31 police officers. We worked with our city manager and our city council, and city council added 5 new police officer positions to our budget this year. And so we have 8 open positions. 5 of those are the new ones that were added to the budget. But we have 5 officers on extended leave. 3 of us are command staff members, and I just had an assistant chief retire. And so we have 17 officers available for overtime for 440 patrol shifts. And so we were unable to fill almost 200 patrol shifts. I'm already looking at July and working with my assistant chief. We're trying to fill 48 open patrol shifts right now in July. And we're doing that through overtime. And so it's been pretty interesting. I am happy to report that we did hire 2 new officers. They start the police academy next week, which is a good thing. The bad thing is it takes us so long to hire, and they will actually not be on solo patrol until probably February or March of next year. And so any lag we have like that is pretty impactful to our operations. So we're working on finding qualified lateral applicants and trying to entice people to come here for our staffing. And so we have a great deal of support from our city manager and an incredible amount of support from our city council. It's just a matter of finding qualified candidates, getting them trained and getting them on the road. Next slide, please. And so we talked about our patrol schedules. We looked at May and June. This is the open shifts we're trying to fill. Next slide, please. And again, this talks about July, and we just had more added to that. And so, again, it just illustrates kind of the challenges we're facing right now. We do have minimum staffing. Day shift, which is 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. We have 2 officers on, and 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. we have 3 officers on. And we have been able to maintain that level through some shift adjustments, some overtimes, and even command staff working some patrol shifts. Next slide, please. Some of the big issues we're dealing with, those of you that are on the lower end of Pacific Highway and in and around 34th, we have a great deal of issues with traffic specifically tied to Love's Truck Stop and semis parking on both sides of 34th. And we are working on a partnership right now with State Patrol Commercial Vehicle Enforcement to kind of help us address that. Homelessness tends to be one of the larger issues that we deal with. All of you are aware of and have been impacted to some extent by the large homeless encampment that was on the WashDOT property. We had a great partnership with WashDOT. We were able to abate that area there. But the problem is we haven't solved homelessness. We're talking about displacement. And so we're moving camps throughout the city. And the one we're working on right now happens to be in the 7800 block of Valley Avenue. I will say a blessing of our new city manager is we have a weekly meeting every Monday to talk about homeless issues. And so Steve's shaking his head. Steve is very engaged from the perspective of there's 2 ways in which we have to respond to homeless issues. The first one is private property, which is fairly easy in the scheme of things. And that if it's on private property, the property owner gets hold of the police department. We ask them to leave. If they don't leave, then they go to jail. And there are some other legal things that really kind of go into play in regards to dealing with property and things of that nature. But for oversimplification purposes, private property homeless issues are pretty straightforward to deal with. The ones that are super complicated are the homeless camps on public right of way. And so Steve and his crew work really hard on identifying private property with homeless issues. They send out compliance letters. We partner with the private landowners to abate those homeless camps, and we tend to have fairly quick resolution on those. Unfortunately, public property is far more complicated. We do have a pretty good plan. We have regular communication now. We're working on a list and location of all of our camps, our priority list, and we'll be over to work on that. And hopefully within the next couple of meetings, we'll actually have almost like a dashboard. So we'll be, I think we're all well informed, but we have to some extent some silos. I think this dashboard will bring us all on the same page and keep us from duplicating efforts. So in that regard, I think we're doing pretty well, and we're improving each week with that. Next slide, please.
I think that's the last one.
Perfect. So that was the kind of the down and dirty, but I think the best juice for the squeeze is for us to have dialogue about what you're experiencing, how we can do or partner together to kind of solve the issues you're having. I see a couple of people here where I've met with their businesses in the last week or so. And we did kind of walk through about how or the steps you could take to maybe improve the site or reporting, or how we can as a police department improve our response. And so those partnerships are invaluable, and we will continue to do that as best we can. And with that, I think, Laura, I'm just going to hit the CPTED thing if you're okay with that before we open up to questions. And so CPTED stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. It was a service that the police department offered. We had a nationally certified CPTED specialist who would come out to your business and do a CPTED study and provide a report and a presentation on the steps that you could take to, for lack of better terms, harden your property and make it less attractive for criminal activity. Again, that was our police specialist. We had 2 open positions. We're currently going through the hiring. Once we get them hired, that will be one of the priorities in regards to their training and certification, but that will take us some time. And so without those certifications, it's really difficult for us from a legal perspective to come out and give you some feedback. But to that extent, Steve Friddle did attach a document in regards to CPTED principles. He shared that with Laura. Laura is going to share that with each of you. I'm more than happy to come out and meet with you in your business and talk about those things in a global fashion, because I'm not a certified CPTED person, but certainly happy to have discussions with you and discuss those with you in detail and help you in any way I can. But the goal is to fill that police specialist position, get that certification going, and offer that service again as quickly as we can. And so that really covers the CPTED capabilities of the police department at this point. Unless Steve has something to offer about CPTED, I think we'll open it up for questions.
Pete, you did a great job, and we apply those same CPTED policies when we're doing the initial review of site plans and stuff, so we start off on the right foot. But you covered it well, and I put my contact information into the chat. Once people read the material and they have questions, I too can be a resource. Again, I'm not certified either, but I can walk you through how we view it at the initial development of a site timeline. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Chief. Thank you, Steve. At this time, we will open it up for questions. If you want to, raise your hand, and I'll get to your question. I don't see any yet. I'm sure there are some there.
I have a general question. It's Mario. So generally speaking, if there happens to be someone, lying on the curb where typically it's not safe, person probably needs some help, is the right protocol to call in for a wellness check to have that person evaluated? What's the right terminology if you call 911?
That's a loaded question in regards to legislative changes. It used to be call in, there's a person passed out on the sidewalk, dispatch would get it, they would put out for information, police would typically go, and if there was a medical issue, we would call the fire department and they would come out. The problem is, and it has changed a little bit with the update in 2022, but in 2021, the police department would almost never go to those because it wasn't a police call, it was a fire call. The problem was the fire department wouldn't go because they were afraid for their safety. And so there was this big when it comes to those type of calls. And so that was one of the unintended consequences I talked about the 21 legislation. They did fix that. And so I would urge you to just call 911, they'll dispatch it and we'll figure that out. What I will say though is how it's resolved probably looks quite a bit different pre-pandemic and pre-legislative changes, in that for us to take somebody to the hospital, we have to show that they're gravely disabled or a danger to themselves and others. And many times the people we're encountering are under the influence of drugs. And if you're not aware, while drugs are still illegal, we can't arrest people for drugs anymore in Washington State. So you could actually shoot up on the sidewalk in front of everybody and we cannot actually arrest you. And so it makes the police response a little more complicated. Fortunately, our officers are very good at dialogue. We frequently talk them to voluntarily getting in an egg rig, going to a hospital and getting treatment, or we find that they are so gravely disabled that we have the ability to take them into protective custody and take them to RCC, which is actually here in Fife. And so we don't have far to travel when we have to take somebody for a voluntary or involuntary commit if they have mental health issues. So I would say if you're concerned about somebody, call. Police and fire will figure it out amongst themselves.
All right, great question, Mario. And it is similar to a lot of the questions that we had last month, which is one of the reasons why we brought some city folks in today, because some of the questions last month brought up some things that that Steve could answer a little bit better. So feel free. I mean, I don't see any hands raised yet, but love to hear some of your questions. Some of the issues you may be having or unresolved thing, if you have anything that's unresolved that you'd like to share with us, feel free to chime in.
I just have a question, not a concern, but Valley Avenue, it just seems to be getting worse and worse, and all the garbage. It looks like somebody took a truck and spilled it upside down the other day.
So
Is
I can,
there anything being done over there?
yeah, I think you noticed the old right of way, that section of roadway that used to be the old valley that abuts up to the new valley. You'll see that we were able to remove all the cars and campers that were there. The city did deploy eco blocks to block that off. But the area you're talking about specifically is WashDOT property. And so there's a couple of things in our response. And the short answer is we're working in partnership with WashDOT. That is on the list to work on to abate. But there are some things that have to occur before that happens. And that is a function of authority and a function of case law. And I say this a lot so people can look it up. There's a case called Martin v. Boise that basically says anyone who is living on public right-of-way, before they can be removed, the city has to offer them, or the jurisdiction, I should say, has to offer them alternative housing. And so when we go into a large encampment, we need to make sure that we have enough beds available to remove those there. And we also need the authority of the landowner. And one of the things we're seeing is that with the pandemic and issues surrounding homelessness, there was a moratorium on removing homeless camps from properties. And so the direction DOT has is that they're not necessarily addressing camps on property that is not under active construction. The good news is Valley is part of that Gateway project. WashDOT has that authority. We are meeting bi-weekly to address that. That's the #1 site from a city WashDOT partnership perspective. The city was able to deal with that old right-of-way issue. It has not come back, knock on wood. And the property adjoining that large field where it's being overtaken is on our list, and we are working our way through that, but it will take a little bit of time.
I do
Thank
have a
you. question
question here. Are one of the closed motels becoming a homeless shelter?
So I'm gonna I'm gonna answer it this way. The nice part about working for City of Fife, our city leadership and our elected officials, I think truly value the input of directors, and I have given mine to our city manager, our city council, and my concerns. And with that, I think this is a more global issue, and I'm going to defer to our city manager for a more in-depth, I think, take on what we're doing with that.
Yeah, thank you, Chief. So as the chief mentioned in his presentation, motels along Pacific Highway are a huge generator of calls for service. And so we have a couple of different strategies to address that. One has been aggressive enforcement of our codes, including going to a hearing to revoke business licenses of motels that are creating serious public safety issues. The other strategy is trying to convert motels to other uses. And we've seen some private businesses buy up the motels and start to renovate them into apartments. Related to that, Pierce County and the City of Fife have set aside $6.8 million for the purchase of and renovation of a motel for housing. Originally, well, so I'll back up here. Pierce County is working on a request for proposals, which is basically a call to the nonprofit community saying, who out there would be able to do this project. Originally, the RFP was really wide open. It said, hey, tell us how you could do this, and we have $6.8 million to contribute. Since then, we've hit the pause button on that, and we've told Pierce County that we want to discuss making that request for proposals way more specific. So we want things in there that would require services provided on site. So things like mental health, drug and gambling services, food, transportation, janitorial, landscape maintenance services, a game plan for city police and Pierce County Sheriff responding, and cameras on site, fencing. So yes, we're still working with the county on that, but there is a lot more work to do to tighten that up and to make sure that if we are involved in converting a motel into housing, so not the private sector, we don't really control that, but if we as a city are involved, that there is going to be very clear expectations about the services provided and safety to the community. So the next step there, we are city leadership, that is going to tour the Aspen Court site in Tacoma, look for lessons learned there, and then we'll be working with Pierce County to really flesh out that request for proposals. And then once that's drafted, we'll share that with the city council, and the city council will make a final decision on whether the city of Fife will participate. But Pierce County could still go forward with it on its own. So that's probably way too much information, but if there's anything I want to leave you with, it's one of a number of strategies to address the hotels. And if we are going to be involved in a hotel or motel conversion, we want to make sure it's done right.
Thank you. Did anyone else have any questions regarding that? All right, looks like you answered it pretty thoroughly, so thank you for that. Okay, I'm not seeing any more questions, but
I just had one question. We've had a lot of auto thefts, and just wanted to see if there's any thoughts of, what can be done. I mean, yesterday, for example, I went to my office. I was there for maybe 15 minutes. During that 15 minutes, someone broke into my car, ransacked it, and took off. And it's like nonstop. I've had so many vehicles stolen. And I think that the numbers that we're seeing on the crime report may be understated, because when I called in to file a report, it's cumbersome. So I wonder how many reports just aren't even getting filed, because it's like a daily occurrence. And I have some folks that work late into the evening. Honestly, I'm very afraid for their safety.
So I have a multi-part answer for that. So Washington State has what they call the Washington Auto Theft Prevention Task Force. It's by governor appointment. Governor Inslee did appoint me to that board 2 years ago. And we are responsible for dispersing funds across the state to combat specifically auto theft. And so part of that funding is for the South Sound Auto Theft Task Force, which is comprised East Pierce County and South King County. And so we have a task force we're able to partner with to deal with like chop shops, stolen vehicle rings, and things of that nature. And we also subsidize or approve grant funding for other technologies that help combat stolen vehicles, and specifically probably one of the most prevalent technologies out there is automatic license plate reader systems. And it really just picks up alphanumerics and runs that against the national database on stolen vehicles. We did apply for an APL grant before I was appointed to the board. We were awarded that grant, and that is technology that we currently have on our streets. We also work very closely with our tribal police partners. They have multiple ALPR units, and a large number of our recoveries and stolen vehicles actually happen in and around the casinos. And so that partnership, I think, strengthens our ability and knowledge of what's going on, sort of our situational awareness. And we just attended the I'm also currently the president of the Pierce County Police Chiefs Association. And so this was a topic of discussion for our association. And WAPTA got additional grant monies to issue to police departments for auto theft. And so as a region, we're applying for, I think, additional positions in our auto theft task force, additional technologies, and we will actually be taking grant requests from police departments in the area for staffing increases and for technologies. And so I just had a WAPTA board meeting last week, and we will be reviewing those grant applications in the coming weeks. And so we're well aware of it. To give you some insight, in Pierce County, I think we're over 1,000 cars a month that have been stolen. And Fife is typically 4 out of 19 jurisdiction on the number of cars stolen. We're behind Pierce County, we're behind Lakewood, we're behind Tacoma. That's not good company considering the size of our city, but that is our reality. So yes, we experience a lot of stolen vehicles. I think we're fortunate that we do have a fairly high recovery rate, but that certainly doesn't help the people that are victimized by having their vehicles stolen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I guess the other part of it is the understating comment. You know, it is cumbersome to call in, and the way that process of filing a police report is not very easy.
I guess I will apologize. There's a number of reasons for that. And for the most part, they have to do with liability. And there's a declaration that the owner has to sign under penalty of perjury that the vehicle is actually stolen, because when we come across a stolen vehicle, you do so with, guns drawn, you're pulling people out, and there's potentially use force. And so officers have to be very careful to make sure that we're not taking what's called a breach of trust, where I lend my vehicle to you, you don't return it, I fall to report it stolen. That has a whole different set of circumstances, and those are almost as frequent as the reported stolen vehicles. And so the reason for the complexity is to ensure that A, we can prove ownership and you have the authority to report it stolen, and 2, to ensure it's not a civil issue and that truly is criminal. So unfortunately, because of how that system sets up, it is a little more cumbersome than, say, an online report or a report that doesn't require that level of investigation, or for the reportee to sign under penalty of perjury.
So I'm curious, when you filled out the report, did you go into the police department, or did you fill out the online report? Because that's something we've talked about here in the past also, is the online reporting, that's an option.
You shouldn't be able to report a stolen vehicle online because there's issues with the declaration that it is truly a stolen vehicle. So if you try to report a stolen vehicle or a property over a certain dollar amount, it should kick you back to a 911 response.
Okay, that's good to know. So what sort of things can you report online?
Theft with no suspect information with a dollar value that's fairly nominal, probably, I think, under $4 or $5 grand. We just increased that. Fireworks complaints, non-in-progress type crimes with no suspect information, low-level theft and vandalism, things of that nature. And even if you get through the system, all of the online reports are reviewed by a patrol sergeant. And so if you do somehow manage to get an online report through that should have been a police response, the sergeant rejects that report and then assigns an officer to reach out to the reportee to make sure that we're actually responding in person or by phone, to make sure that it's properly documented and routed through our investigations unit to make sure that we can follow up on those types of crimes that shouldn't have been reported online. And those should be few and far between.
Good to know. Good to know. I didn't realize that there was those limitations. Okay, did that answer your question? I keep wanting to call you Betty. I know you're not Betty.
No. Yeah, it did. Just a suggestion though, if you did a bait car, I mean, you catch one a night, and in another city, I have a lot of locations, and the crime that I've seen in Western Washington is literally off the chart. We're in 5 states, and of all the 5 states, Washington is like 95% of all the crime against my businesses. And just a thought, but if you did a bait car in anywhere around, that the business Fife area, you catch them in one night. And in another, I was talking to another police chief out of Tacoma, and we had a discussion, and he said, he goes, Steve, we caught one individual and 30% of our auto thefts disappeared. So maybe, instead of trying to chase all the cars that are stolen, maybe just get the bad guy off the street and, do a bait car. I know it takes labor and officers, but I mean, we just, something has to change. It is so bad in Fife. I mean, I know you see the chart. It's just really, it's demoralizing.
Yes, and I'll put that in a little perspective. We used to have a bait car. The problem is the liabilities associated with bait cars are problematic, and here's why. We can't chase stolen cars. You have to have probable cause. So just because you're in a stolen vehicle doesn't mean we can arrest you. We have to detain you, do an investigation. We have to prove knowledge. And in this state, don't be shocked, but on average, it takes 12 arrests and convictions for stealing a motor vehicle to get prison time. Our jails are still hampered by COVID, and we have booking restrictions. And I mean, I hate to sound this dire, but remember months ago being on a homicide scene with the suspect, and we were wondering if the jail was going to take them. And so it's not that dire, but we have repeat chronic criminals what the jail will not take because of booking restrictions. And myself or our assistant chiefs have to call the jail lieutenant to get special waivers. Now, I will say we are better suited or situated than a majority of our counterparts in that City of Fife contracts with SCORE for our misdemeanor arrest. And so while Pierce County Jail is not taking a majority of misdemeanor arrests, we do not have that same issue in Fife because we transport ours up to SCORE. The problem is the crimes you're talking about are felonies, and we can't book them into SCORE. We have to book them into Pierce County Jail. And so with the booking restrictions, it's almost more problematic to have a felony level arrest than it is a misdemeanor level arrest for Fife. And so that's kind of the operational realities. And you hear a lot of frustration where I hear it, officers, the jail won't take them, they have them in custody and they have to drive them. This is not Fife, because we take them to SCORE, but they take them to the end of the driveway or they take them to a new road and let them go. And they're actually telling the victims and the reporting party that this is occurring. So there is a great deal of frustration community-wide. And I would say Fife is better situated than our counterparts in and around Pierce County because we do contract with SCORE for all of our misdemeanor bookings. And the fact that we have our own court and our own prosecutor, we have a very aggressive prosecutor. She is phenomenal at charging people and holding people accountable. But again, that is only for misdemeanor and gross misdemeanor crimes.
Wow, thank you. I saw Mario had his hand raised, and there's also another question in the chat that we'll get to after Mario's. So go ahead, Mario, and then we'll get to Steve Bosley's question in the chat.
Yeah, thanks. This is kind of a two-part. Deals with seasonality, and then is there a list of tips? So I was thinking more from a residential standpoint with summer, right around the corner. Do the overnight, prowlers around homes, does that spike during summer? My concern is that if it feels as though last year, and I don't remember if it was summer, we were getting a lot of reports from neighbors where they saw someone prowling on the, on the Ring camera, but that actually doesn't prevent anything because people just put on a hoodie and they're in and out in 3 minutes. So does this spike during summer, that the home prowlers? And is there a list that homeowners can call upon either, at the city level that they can then take and download to help sort of harden their residential property a little bit better?
So the first part, I think, anecdotally and over the course of 28 plus years, I'm not so sure that's true. But what the problem we have is many times I'll contact businesses or residents that talk about the crime spikes in their area and they're not reporting it. And so there's a reality or perception that crime is high, but I showed you that heat map many times, especially in our neighborhoods. Those aren't congruent because those are going unreported. And so much like the stolen vehicles, is that a true measure of what we're experiencing? And it has to do specifically with reporting. And so generally speaking, I think we do tend to see an uptick in almost all types of crimes through the warmer months. But I don't necessarily know that that's just a trend, I would say anecdotally. Now that we're reporting these out, we do show that in our annual report. So you can go right to our website, pick that up. It looks at those crimes and it tracks it year over year, right? When we talk about our state of the PD. The other thing you have access to is our actual crime mapping tool. So you can go to our website, click on crime mapping. You can type in your address or any specific address. You can set a radius in and around that, and it will give you every single crime that was reported in and around that area. And so that's something you can do in real time, anytime you have a question. One of the first things that I do when we get a call from a business owner or a community about crime concerns is I pull that data, and I tend to pull it for 6 months to a year so I can see what's actually reported. And more times than not, when I meet with the business owner or the homeowner, there is a large gap between what is occurring and what is reported. And so as we talk about our staffing issues and that predictive policing map, our discretionary patrol time is centered around those high impact crime dense areas. And so if we are not getting crime reported, there are areas on our map that probably would require more patrol time than we're currently spending on that. But we don't know that with crimes that aren't getting reported. And so that's part of the problem. In regards to there's tips, Laura is going to be sending a document that Director Friddle sent out on CPTED. That's a good start. You certainly can Google crime prevention tips. And what you'll find is you'll see us steering away from specific recommendations because of a lack of certification and liability exposure, right? So we can talk things about, we're seeing an increase in gas thefts because of the increase in gas prices. Well, I don't think I'm going to create a lot of liability for the city to tell you, park where it's lit, park in the garage, put on a locking gas cap. Those are straightforward common sense tips that are not going to get myself or the city in trouble. In regards to giving you recommendations about lighting and fencing and large capital investments, we got to be a little more careful, right? I can say generically speaking, cameras, lighting, security, those types of things tend to be effective at reducing crime, not eliminating, but reducing. And so those are discussions we can have, but specific recommendations on properties or strategies really tend to focus around people with those certifications that can do the studies, back it up with their training and experience, and the strategies that have been proven through those courses, if that makes sense.
Does I have just a quick follow-up to all of this? So where I live, I'm fortunate, I live in a cul-de-sac, and all of our neighbors know one another. And I believe there's a number of the parents who work maybe the night shift. So there is some coming and going overnight, which I think is a good thing, right? Because if you're prowling around, you probably don't want to be seen. Is that, is having eyes on a area, is that really the only true deterrent, is visibility? Because it's something that I could share with our neighbors. If you're coming and going, keep your eyes open. If you're typically coming and going at 2 a.m, let's just say.
Well, I mean, I don't want to be oversimplifying things. I think criminals tend to look for easy targets and ones that are not likely to get them caught. And so areas that are dark, that are abandoned, do not have a lot of foot or vehicle traffic, that are isolated from residents or high traffic areas tend to be the first targets because they tend to be soft. There's a less chance of being identified or caught in the act. And so, like you said, a cul-de-sac really in of itself is almost a natural CPTED measure in that, especially if you have a number of houses where people are coming and going 24/7, right? That traffic increases the likelihood of someone not belonging to that area being identified and the police being contacted, right? But again, those are straightforward common sense type things that you yourself as not a police officer pointed out. And right, so that is also lighting, traffic, fencing. Do we cut down shrubs so that it's visible from the street? Those types of things are certainly things we can talk about or suggest. And those are out there in most CPTED websites or even crime prevention websites that don't talk necessarily about CEPTED.
So we're just about out of time, and I have two questions I'd like to get, two final questions to get to super quickly if we can. One is what's the status update on 20th and the repaving?
Yep, I can take that one. So very happy to see that the asphalt was put down overnight. We know this has taken a while, and bottom line is the wet weather in April and May have affected the project. You can't pave when it's raining, and then you also have to give the asphalt plant 2 days notice that you need asphalt. And with rain in the forecast for much of the last 2 months, it was impossible to say we would need asphalt 2 days from now. So sorry, I know it's been inconvenient, but the asphalt is down. Over the next few weeks, we'll be raising the manholes and other utilities and putting down striping, and then it should be done.
All right, thank you. That will be nice. Ann Fish, we'll go to you for our final question.
Very quickly, I'm sure that the city manager already knows Forterra is a large nonprofit, and they have done, they bought a hotel motel in Tukwila and are converting it. So that's one thing. The other thing is I just want to say thank you for Pacific Avenue. I've lived around here for 55 years, and I think it's beautiful. They're wonderful what you've done out there. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Ann. And thanks to everyone. We will be putting another meeting together. I think that maybe the every other month format will work. I'm not sure what everyone else thinks, but I will be sending out a survey after this meeting, just to kind of get your feedback on the meeting and to find out about what your thoughts are on a next meeting. So be watching for that. And again, I want to thank everyone for being here. Thank you to our city staff who have been here, and especially to Chief Fisher. So thank you all, and have a good day. Bye.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.